is a typical amount of material we might prune out of a yard in one day. In a Class 1 manicure pruning and deadwooding and target pruning of a yard, we may get 10, 20 tarp loads of trimmed material. That will then break down into about 4, 5, 6 tarp loads of chipped material. About 5 tarp loads of green trimmed material will chip down into about 1 bag. We're using a 20 horsepower Bearcat chipper. It uses a side cutter flywheel and it has a shredder box too. That explains the fine texture of the chip here, because after the side cutter, the material goes through a series of flails. The flails break it down even finer. Then we have about 4 different mesh sizes of screen we can use in the discharge chute of the chipper, depending on how fine we want to grind our material. This is about the medium grid in there right now. There's a finer mesh, but it takes a little longer to get the material through it. This is a good compromise on both productivity and effectiveness. So we're getting good results with our medium screen, and so we'll turn this material loose in the landscape. So here we are. This is what we're making out of all this brush. We've tarped them up in our 7x7 burlap tarps, and you can see what we've ground this down into. It's pretty nice stuff. Sometimes we'll even shovel it through a second time and get a double grind, a fine grind out of it, but this is pretty good. This is good enough to use as mulch and compost around trees, to make a thermal and moisture insulating blanket over the root zone. We've recycled the materials back into the landscape. We're making these nutrients available to the trees so they can rise up. And this will also suppress weeds. By putting this down around the drip line of a tree, we're suppressing the weeds and foxtails and things that would otherwise come up. So it's an overall management practice. When rainfall does come, it absorbs it and holds it there, does the slow release for us. So in a little over half an hour, we've chipped up about 8 or 9 bags of this nice looking mulch here. Each of these tarp loads is probably close to 100 pounds. This probably represents about 800 pounds of material that came out of one yard in one day, a Class 1 manicure pruning visit. Each of these tarp loads would probably represent about $20, $30 of mulch fed to the landscape. We call this gold at the curb because oftentimes leaf rakings, pine needles, and chip are thrown away. They're put out in the green waste barrel and go to a landfill. Far better to recycle these materials right back into the landscape. Use them right away. They don't have to be transported anywhere. They don't take up space in a landfill. And we're returning those nutrients back to the soil. This is how nature builds soil anyway. A tree will shed many times its weight in its lifetime of leaves. We can return those leaves to the root zone, to the soil, and we're building soil all that time.